Welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I'm blessed to be joined by Andreas Widmer. Andreas is a director of the Art and Carlisle Chioka Center for Principal Entrepreneurship at the Catholic University of America. And that's an amazing center that does tremendous work in both academic and practical training for Catholics to engage in the work of business, of entrepreneurship. Andreas is also giving a talk, a lecture at Acton University 2026, Principal Entrepreneurship, Creativity, and Faith and Work Culture. Share that. Andreas, thank you for joining us, my friend. How are you?
It's always good to be with you, Marcus.
So you really have developed this program as a bit of a brainchild that has become one of the hallmarks of a notion of Catholic entrepreneurship. And I know that's painting with extremely broad strokes here, but would you mind sharing with us what your paradigm is?
Look, nothing that I ever say or do is new. Like, I think we as Christians, we as Catholics are called to enculturate, in a sense, to take our faith and then express it in ways that our current generation can understand it. I have a business background. I think I know a couple of things about business, and then I'm trained in Catholic theology, and I can bring the two things together. So my book, this talk I'm going to give, is on principled entrepreneurship, which to me is Catholic entrepreneurship. This is what I do. I try to describe what I'm doing and what I believe, but explained in a way that let's say the average person can. You know how we ask ChatGPT, explain this to me like you would to a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old, and then you actually understand it. Well, I'm trying to do that with integrating the Catholic anthropology and business, and both on the one side, on a very highly integrated level and very profound level, but explain it in a very straightforward level so that the average business person can understand.
As you well know, it's an unfortunate reality, but within the sphere of the church and the faith, we can sometimes think that the faith necessitates that we isolate ourselves from the work.
Yeah. It's sad. We do it with a lot of things. It's this, the church calls it the divided life, right? And we need to live an integrated life. That Jesus isn't just a man on Sunday, right? I lived my own life like this for a long time, where you think yourself, well, I'm a good Catholic. I go to church on Sunday, and I get the sacraments. That's all true, but let me ask you, who's the man? Like, if he's the man on Sunday when you go to church, who's the man on Monday, and Monday through Friday, and at work? Where are the priorities? Whose will is top, right? When it costs you something, in business the question is always trade-offs. And the trade-offs are, at some point it's going to cost you something. You do this or you do that. In that decision, who takes top priority? That's the question. And that means that you cannot differentiate between when do I look at my life from the perspective of God and when do I look at it from the perspective of business. No, you are always going to look at it from the perspective of God. It's not just in business that we do this. We do this in all kinds of things. We do this in the relationships, in friendships, where I always talk to my students about, and we can all relate to this. You know how you're almost like a different person when you're with your grandparents, because no matter how old you are, they're gonna go, oh, you coochie, and then you assume this persona that's different. But with your college buddies, it's like, hey, let's. And I was in the military, and then there's another thing, and then with your wife and so on, and that once this gets into how I behave and how I do decide what to do and not to do, that needs to stop. Like, that's, in psychology, we would call that schizophrenic. When you're one person with them and then another person with that. And we need to do this across our life, to integrate this view of the presence of God into every aspect of our life. And the good news about this is that it'll make every aspect of life, it elevates every aspect of life and brings you greater joy and happiness in the moment. We're all after it, but that's it. That's the ingredient.
John Paul II in his Theology of the Body talks about, well, it's something to this effect, that this is what it means to be an integrated person, that every facet of your life is reflecting from this core reality, and so you're not, like you mentioned, schizophrenic in that sense.
Of course, you hit the nail on the head, because that's where I get it from. Because, look, guys, the truth is that everything I say and do, I'm a JP2 guy. I learned the ropes from John Paul II, and the big thing is I think John Paul solved the issue that was there ever since René Girard, right? To separate the mind from the body, which had disastrous consequences, and that also has to do with the non-integrated life. And I think the theology of the body is the answer to that. And everything I teach is simply taking what I understand from the theology of the body, from his approach, to business, to life, and I incorporate it into the situations. And that's, I all encourage you to read the theology of the body, but for the average Catholic, and I don't mean this in a negative sense, but for somebody who doesn't read a lot of this kind of stuff, this is difficult things to understand. But boy, is that a gem. So what you and I do, and what I almost do full time, is I've heard this for 40 years, so I kind of understand it now, and I translate it. So the art of principled entrepreneurship, at its core, is the theology of the body applied to business.
You just blew the minds of all of our listeners right now. I don't think anyone here thinks of it that way. But when you start thinking of it that way, you suddenly realize your business becomes the place through which your theology of the body can sanctify the rest of the world.
The insight, the core insight is very profound but simple. And the core insight is that no animal can work. They've never created anything. Somebody built this microphone, or somebody made this coffee on my iPhone or something. Those are creative things that they didn't grow. Somebody had the idea and made it. That's the same with the world. Why is there a world versus no world? Because somebody had the idea and made it, right? And the reason why I can work and an animal cannot is because I'm made in the image and likeness of the Creator. So when I create, when I was involved in software, when our companies would create the software, in a real sense, we participate in God's creativity. That's part of the stewardship mandate, that when God sort of finished his part of creation, he put man here as the steward and say, you continue. You continue creating this. And by doing that, you continue creation, you participate in God's creativity, and you imitate him as God creates. And what happens when you imitate somebody a lot? You become more like them. How is God? Holy. Work is a path to holiness. It's an integral path to holiness. It's one of the things that differentiates us from animals, and it's our higher calling to actually be the steward who gets, in a sense, continue or finish creation, because God made us sons and daughters and gave us this task to do. Therefore, when we do this kind of work, at the deepest level, it's a spiritual activity, and because it's the spiritual activity connected to nature. This is the integration back from what Descartes disconnected, where John Paul reconnects the two, that this is your spiritual calling to continue creation, physical creation, except that because of our will being free, we get to and there's, because work predates the fall, but after the fall, we have this choice of good and evil. Therefore, I have to decide to create goods that are truly good. I have to decide to provide services that truly serve, because that is now my, that's what we wrought by eating the apple, right?
Let's pause there. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, Andreas Widmer, he's the director of the Art and Carlisle Chioka Center for Principled Entrepreneurship at the Catholic University of America. He's going to continue exactly this, that our work actually, when done for good, sanctifies and continues God's work in creation. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter. Welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I'm joined by a dear friend, Andreas Widmer, director of the Art and Carlisle Chioka Center for Principled Entrepreneurship at the Catholic University of America. Andreas, you were just telling us that now you keep dropping these bombs, these bombshells, and it's amazing because just like the theology of the body is this time bomb that the church needed,
exactly.
the application of that into, in this case, our entrepreneurial life is the time bomb within the time bomb.
Yeah, and that's why I think the greatest effect of John Paul II has not happened yet. This is the JP2 generation and the JP2 writings have not fully matured yet. And I think he talked about a new springtime, and I think that springtime is coming. We're starting to see, people start to feel it. The faith is becoming more profound. Young people are attracted, just like what he said. And it is that faith that engages the full intellect. That isn't just a culture or just a habit, but engages the full intellect and then action. And I think this is what he calls us to, that each one of us, as we learn this and as we, it's like as we read his writing or read the Bible, that we take that and say, how can I communicate this to my peers in wherever God plants me? And I think that's what you're seeing, that these time bombs are in a way these insights, these God moments where you see a bit of, these are like God flashes, right? When you say, wow, that's true. I mean, his whole book is like, his whole life is like that. And so what I'm trying to do is to just share that with others. And I ask you who are listening to share that with others so that we all pass on this good news. And the good news is that we are made for greatness, we are made for happiness, the profound happiness, and we are embodied spirits and incarnate spirits, that we have this opportunity to bring God into our creation, and individually, each one of us. And I think that is something that makes us flourish and happy. And that's my contribution in a small way, is to do that with entrepreneurship, and how creating companies is a very spiritual, in my opinion, very godly thing to do.
I could just sit with that. I find that so beautiful. And I think this is also such an encouragement for the people listening right now, because we're seeing in the Catholic sphere a tendency for young men and women who, if they love the Lord, they go into studying theology or philosophy.
Exactly.
Which, and this is rich, right, coming from a biblical theologian. Like, I understand that,
Yeah.
right? But I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm president of Ivory Communications.
Yep.
And so what you're proposing is that, no.
Yeah, exactly. We do it both ways.
Yes.
It's like, I see so many wonderful young people, and I don't misunderstand me, but I'm saying God has given you so many gifts. And then, of course, you're attracted to get closer to God, and the where you see it the most is right in the church. So you want to go into ministry. But what I'm calling you to do, and I think what is attractive is, with all your talents, to actually go into the marketplace and sanctify that. Right? There's so many young people. I think specifically. Think of all the focus missionaries and what they learn when they're out there being focus missionaries. That is a perfect preparation for business, because they know how to create value propositions. They know how to connect other directedness. It's the number one thing in business. They know this, and it's the best training for later on starting a company or going into a company and do sales or marketing or fundraising. And if you bring along with you what you have found during your time as focus, I think you can you have a further reach with your sanctification of daily life than if you would go being a DRE at a local parish. I don't mean to knock it. I'm just saying, if you're 20-some years old, I think I'll call you to come out into the marketplace and actually be the leaven in our society, which is very effective when you're in your 20s, because you get a good 20 years to work at it.
And what that does is, in those years, after a certain point, your brain, sure, neurologically, but also your habits, your tendencies,
Yeah.
they solidify a certain way, right? But in those early years between
Yeah.
neuroplasticity and your
Yeah.
capacity for ingenuity, those are the years that God's going to stretch you to see the need and
Yeah.
fill the need in society.
And you know, we are so the. Let me go back quickly to the theology of the body and the connection, and then I'm going to connect to what you're going to get when you go into business, and I want to say when you go into value creation, business is to create value for others, and the difference, what is more valuable before I produce it and to you after you buy it, is new money, and so in that sense. Business is value creation, and value is measured in money, and so business has to do with money. Yeah, but the core thing of it is, business is work. It's me applying myself to matter. Even software in sense is matter. That is the same as when God from the outside came and said, "Let us create the earth," or "Let us create animals." That's what you do when you do business. That you have an idea and you apply your idea to matter, to this physical universe, and you create. The first objective, therefore, is be creative, like be perfect like your Father in heaven is perfect. Be creative like your Father in heaven is creative, and that shall lead you to holiness, because if you imitate God, the Lord, then you become more holy. That is the number one aspect of work. So I ask you, when you do your work, and you see sometimes that happens in the church, that somebody does their work and it does not make them holy, because they're not doing it that by creating goods that are truly good, or services that truly serve, or doing it with the attitude of love to the neighbor, because that's how God creates. And so that's the first examination you need to make about your work. Is this making me, in that sense, more holy? Not in a pious sense in that sense, but in a real sense of saying, am I creating value for the world and for others? And I do this in a loving way. That makes you more holy. Now, if you're on your path to holiness, turn around, and that's the first objective of work. The second objective of work is then to support others in that holiness. If you work with others, are you helping them to reach the pinnacle of their ability? Holiness is, I always say in secular terms, it's becoming whole. You know, it's like the army used to have this ad saying, "Be all you can be." Business is about reaching your full potential, right? It's an opportunity. Now, turn around and see the person next to you and say, am I helping this person to reach their full potential, or am I just using them? That would be against the faith, right? Against
principle entrepreneurship.
God will never use somebody as a means to an end. We are the end, right? And so, are you doing that? So the support of others around me, to support them in their excellence, that's the second objective of work, and it's very important, and they're ranked, but happen simultaneously. The third objective of work is, because we are incarnate spirits, we have a right to physical well-being. Jesus went to parties.
Yeah.
Jesus loved.
He
They
drank up all the wine.
Oh yeah, they drank up all the wine. He made wine, guys. So I don't think that Jesus was this drab guy or something, but there is a right, in the right order, there is a right for the body. There is a right for us to reap the rewards from our creating value, that we get a share of that value, so that we can feed our families, that we can have some leisure and fun and this and that. And that's the third objective. A reward is the third objective of work. Now, when you go out, I go back to the focused missionary, because I think there's a lot of them who should be entrepreneurs and should go into business. When they then apply this to work, God will actually, through their creativity, reward them with lots of success. And then they make lots of money. And literally, it's making money. They're not taking the money from somebody else. They're making the money. It's wealth creation. Imagine then later on, in the autumn of your life, you come back, and with that wealth, now you can bless the church. Then you can come back and help other kids to go into focus and sponsor them. But then you can also become a benefactor, which is sorely needed in the church, in your parish, in the different ministries and apostolates and so on. And I think that's how God created the world, for us to go through these stages, and to really, during our productive years, in a sense, like where we have a lot of energy, to go out and be value creators and not be ashamed of it, because this is, if you create goods that are truly good and services that truly serve, you should be proud of the wealth that creates. But then you should turn around and say, how may I put this wealth to the glory of God?
We've got about a minute left. Do you have a rousing encouragement for our listeners about being fully faithful, theological and philosophical, but also working the marketplace?
Working the
marketplace.
Look, in short, what I want to encourage you is just start. God is not this judge who sits there and says, no, I don't want you to do that, or that you have to guess. God is a bit more like your grandmother, that anything you do, God is going to be your biggest fan, right? If you do sincerely and say, Lord, come into this, and I want to do this, you don't have to guess at your vocation. You don't have to guess what God wants you to do. You get to decide, and God will be your biggest fan once you start. But stop planning and start. Don't bet the farm or so. Start in a reasonable way, but start and allow God to come in and be your fan and put things in front of you. And then, yes, you don't know all the answers. I don't know all the answers, what's around the corner, but I'm going to start to walk, and walking with the Lord means that I don't know what happens tomorrow, but my faith is in God, and the project here is not this company being successful or that project being successful. The project is my holiness, and whatever God puts in my path is used for my holiness, even failure. And so, in a sense, when you walk with God like this, you can't go wrong.
I've been talking with Andreas Widmer, Director of the Art and College Chioka Center for Principled Entrepreneurship at the Catholic University of America, and he's been talking about principled entrepreneurship. Work the marketplace for the glory of God and the sanctification of the world. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.